Quick warning, interjection here. Luke's pulling this from later on, but there's going to be some potty mouth. Okay, Luke, put that up front. Hey, good morning everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening. I don't know what time it is where you are. Morning for me this time around, so no special glass of wine or scotch to share with you at this point, but if you're in the evening, enjoy 1 o'clock. Let's see. Here we go, director's commentary. I'll just mention off the top of this one too that I'm closing in on the last episodes of Survivorman. There's probably about 5 more to go. And then I'll be done. And I think what I will do after that is I want to do 2 special ones. One is going to be my final, because I don't ever want to talk about it again after I do this, but I'm going to do a dissection of all the other survival shows. We're going to walk through Man vs. Wild and Dual Survival up to Alone and Naked and Afraid and all of that. And I'm going to give you my take on that as a filmmaker and as a survival instructor. No more, not from authority, just an opinion. That's all it'll be. But I'm going to do a full breakdown on all of those shows in one commentary here. That'll be coming up. And then also, I was thinking I would do a commentary on Snowshoes and Solitude. And before I get into a lot of other stuff, I would say if you are into my music, then please go over to Les Stroud Music, that channel, and subscribe. And there's lots of music videos and things that go there that do not end up on this channel. But without further ado, here we go. We are into the director's commentary for Patagonia. Now, this was a real kind of an oddball. It turned out to be an oddball. Now, there's a story I could tell about where I was at, sort of towards with the network executives and how things played out towards the end of Survivorman. I mean, I was never canceled. I was never shut out. I just sort of like stopped, you know. And Patagonia was for me an example of the kind of survival stories that I could get into. I was getting thicker into the other variations on survival. So the Kane family in Oregon, which you can watch that director's commentary. By the way, if you want to see this Patagonia Survivorman without me interrupting, you can do that. Just go watch the full episode. Go through the playlists, you will find it. You know, do a search and find it. But I was taking on these other stories that had actually happened. I wrote a book called Will to Live, and in that book I dissected my 10 favorite survival stories. So I wanted to do that cinematically with the Survivorman series, rather than, you know, you got to imagine after 15 years, just 7 days, 7 days, 7 days, 5 days, 5 days, 10 days, 10 days, over and over and over again. Gets boring, and I'm looking for more creative inspiration. So I started taking on these stories. We called it Survivorman Legends, just for the sake of it, gave it another little by-title. And this came out of it, and it was a story of a hiker that perished in Patagonia. Now, here's the thing. Before I press play here, I got to set this up a little bit. The oddball of this one was that I think it was the one and only time that I wanted to film a Survivorman in a park, because I was never ever able to film any Survivorman episodes in parks. Too many rules and regulations. Everything I wanted to do would have been, you know, I would have been fined for it. So getting permission to do the things I've done as Survivorman, that was always a big hassle. You know, I had to get permissions and licenses and, you know, Crown land in Canada versus BLM land in the United States versus national forest versus private lands. All of this requires a lot of specialty permits, and I think a lot of filmmakers don't realize that, and they're going to find themselves getting caught on YouTube because they're going to be doing things where the evidence in court is going to be their actual video. In my case, I was doing this for a network. I had to get all of the paperwork in order. So here we are now, the one and only time I wanted to go in the park, a park in Patagonia, and the reason was because that's where this story actually happened. And I knew also that I wouldn't be doing actual the kind of survival I normally do where I can, you know, fish or trap a squirrel or something like that. I was really going to be retracing this hiker's steps. So fair enough. All right, let's get into it, and then I'm going to stop and tell you about the shit show it was just before I started to do this. But let's get into it first. Here we go, Patagonia Survivorman. On December 21st, 2013, an Argentine tourist by the name of Loreno Emmanuel Santos checked in by himself at a hostel in El Calafate, Argentina, where he spent the night before heading out the next morning and crossed the border to Torre del Paine National Park in Chile. He left a bag at the hostel, which he wanted the staff to hold on to for him, and said he'd be back to pick it up after doing the famous O trekking circuit of Torre del Paine National Park. He never came back for the bag. I'll start off by saying, you know, Max Atwood is with me. I think it was just Max and I, maybe John Buchanan as well, down there. Yeah, I'm sure John was there. I can't remember if Ian Auger was there doing aerials or not. I'll find out with the credits. But so, and this was the most jealous I ever was of giving. I'm getting texts while I do this. And I love you too is the text. This was the most jealous I ever was of Max Atwood being able to get all of the beauty shots. And I've explained this before. In the beginning, like season 1 Survivorman, every scrap of footage you saw was mine. I shot it all. I had to. And I had to stay there behind after my 7 days and go there earlier before my 7 days to film all these time lapses and animals and stuff. But here in Patagonia, Max had an opportunity to just film. He got to film a cougar with cubs. I was just so, or puma with cubs, actually, as they're called down there. By the way, puma, mountain lion, cougar, all the same species. They grow a little differently. They get the largest they are is down here in Patagonia, upwards of 250 pounds. The smallest they are would be, say, the eastern cougar in say, Ontario in Canada, and everything sort of in between. But Max got to film all of this, and man, was I jealous of that. It was a thing where towards the final episodes of Survivorman, I was getting tired of having other guys get the opportunity to do all the fun shooting. The face of outdoor adventure and world travel has changed since the early days of Survivorman, when that series launched an entire new media genre, survival TV. With the explosion of outdoor adventure and with the buffet. So you can see how late into filming Survivorman this is. Here I am even on the show referencing the genre that started because of the Survivorman series, that then you had this explosion. So this is how far into it. This is why I was looking for other ways to tell survival stories and leaning on true stories and legends and things that had actually happened that I could play off of. Of bad survival television, inspiring people to head out ill-informed. People are dying. The whole point of Survivorman has always been to teach the right way, the safe way, not to take chances and go over the top and put yourself in peril. So I'm here, Patagonia, Chile, in one of the most stunningly beautiful places on the planet. And I'm hiking a relatively easy trail. Nothing should ever go wrong here. Yet it... So the reason for that little diatribe of an introduction was because that was the truth. There were people, and I know some of them, you know, were also Survivorman fans. And when you have, say, individuals who may be intellectually challenged, you know, being fans of something like this, you know, you run this danger of who you're influencing and what might happen. And the way I had done Survivorman, it was always just to be teaching skills. And I mean, it's almost like with Wild Harvest, I do a disclaimer before the series Wild Harvest about, look, you can learn about these wild plants in the books. You can learn a lot by watching this show, but you've got to go out with an expert. You know what? Just for the sake of it, case in point, Luke, play them one of the disclaimers that we show for the Wild Harvest series, so you get a handle on where I'm going with this. Go ahead, Luke. Hey everyone, on Les Stroud's Wild Harvest, I get the opportunity to show you a few tips and some techniques for gathering wild edibles. But this is only meant to open the doors for you to an amazing adventure of being out here and partaking of the wild harvest. The only way to truly and safely identify a plant so that you can harvest it and harvest it properly is to seek knowledge from a local expert. Use your books, go online, but find somebody locally who's passionate about wild edible plants. Take their courses, and then you can safely enjoy the wild harvest. So that was done because PBS stations, American Public Television, they wanted that. And they were smart to ask me to do that. I almost feel like Survivorman could have used the same thing. And it's this, look, you can't watch a show like Survivorman and watch it like, well, let me go back. You can't watch Olympic ski jumping and having never put on skis and the next day put on skis and go down a jump. You can't do that. You'll kill yourself. Survival is the same. The fact that the genre that developed and became so big became the impetus for more recreational survival is a problem. Now, don't get me wrong. I do and did recreational survival. That's how I learned, in a class with instructors. So the version of recreational survival to do is in a class with instructors. It's the way to do it. There are great instructors out there. You know, in the United States, you have David Halliday and David Westcott, John and Jerry McPherson, Matt Graham. In Canada, Doug Getgood, Dave Arama. You know, these are, you know, and rest in peace, we had Morse Kochanski. These are amazing survival instructors, and Adam LaRue with Sharpening Stone. You got to check that out in Oregon. And he sells out quickly, by the way. Very good friend of mine, just up the road from where I live. These amazing instructors. This is what you need to do. You need to go out and learn from an instructor. But what was happening was people were watching it on TV thinking, I can go do that. You know, weekend warriors, young men and women who just want to be cool and go, I can just do this. No. Survival is every bit as dangerous as going down a big ski jump or strapping on a pair of skates and stepping out onto the ice in an NHL game when you're, you know, barely can skate. I mean, it's dangerous. And survival is very dangerous. And I always say this, there's only one thing you want to do in a survival situation. What is it? If you've been listening, right, go home. You don't want to build a better A-frame shelter. You just want to go home. So that's what I was going on about here in this introduction. I'm realizing that now, that I think we'd come over the hump of it, and now it was this big thing, and I just didn't care anymore. I'm going to say what I need to say. It does, here and around the world, in places meant to inspire us to love nature, to get out and travel, tragedies are continuing. It's time to fix some of that. On December 22nd, Loreno Santos set off alone from El Calafate by bus. He had emailed friends and family the day before to let them know he was going to do the O Circuit, a 120-kilometer, 74-mile trail that usually takes 8 to 9 days. In my pack, I'm carrying the same items probably almost every hiker on this trail is carrying: a sleeping bag, thermarest, some food, even a stove. So you'd think this should be nothing more than a camping trip. But if that's the case, then why do people still perish out in beautiful and even controlled places? Now, I just want to point out here, my backpack, you can see that it's a Gregory backpack. I don't do any work or business with them or for them or anything, but I will say that it's my favorite backpack. I've tried Arc'teryx and so all the brands. I mean, over my career, and certainly as an outdoor guide, I have worked with every brand there is of tent and sleeping bag, sleeping pad, you know, the Thermarests. Funnily enough, Thermarest is actually a brand, but like Kleenex, those of us in the industry, we just call them Thermarests now, even if they're not. And backpacks, of course. And so I've found over the years that Gregory seems to be the one that works for my back, my physiology, because it's going to be different for you. But one of the great things, by the way, about checking out a backpack, if you're in the market for a backpack, some of the stores, I don't know if they'll do it here in Canada at what used to be Mountain Equipment Co-op, and I don't know, I think they're now REI. Someone can post about it. But in the United States, they have REI. They will let you take a backpack home just to try it out and see. And so we would take a backpack home from REI. I say we because my wife and I would do this, and we would load it up as if we were, going on a camping trip, and then we go hiking with it, for the day up in the hills, and come back and just to see, where are there blister marks, where does it cut, does it hurt, and that led me to, putting back the Arc'teryx, for example, and in the end, it was always Gregory. I still have that Gregory backpack. The other waterproof kind of orangey lime green pack that you see in other episodes, I still have. Some of this equipment that I did on Survivorman, I still have and I still use. I use that Gregory now for rucksacking, which I'll get into when I get into how Survivorman stays fit. But I do rucksacking, and this is my pack. It's a good one. If you're in the market, check out Gregory. I do highly recommend them. I love them.
Such as this. And it's situations like this that can give you a bit of a false sense of security. There's a lot of trails. You start off, not such a big deal, and you get to certain spots, and it can become very treacherous, even dangerous, very, very dangerous.
You can kind of tell that I'm sort of limp walking there. I think this was an era where I was still having a lot of back issues. I can't remember. Maybe not. It shouldn't be. But it does kind of look like I've got some kind of, I've always had a hip issue, which I completely have, my life was saved by, sorry, don't let your eyes glass over, especially you middle-aged and old guys. My life was saved by yoga, completely. I got ruined, severely damaged, according to the MRI, L3, 4, and 5. They're fine. Thank you, yoga. But you can see that I've got a bit of a limp here.
You got to know this before you set out, or you're setting yourself up for failure. Even with the experience that I have, which, okay, is pretty decent, I suppose, you still have to be careful. I've been walking for quite a while now with my shirt off, and I can feel my body temperature starting to drop. I got to pay attention to that, notice that. Yet my back is still sweating. So the sweat can convince my mind to keep my shirt off and keep going. But if it starts to cool down late in the night like this, I could have hypothermia set in, even on this beautiful sunny evening.
Now, I want to point out here that one of the fun things on this one, a little behind-the-scenes story, is that I had Max Atwood with me, and he and I debated for quite a while on, like, I wonder if you should just come with me on this one, and you could shoot so much more of what I'm seeing and doing, sort of thing. We really, really debated it for a while, and I thought, no, we just can't, So he ended up walking with me for, I think it was quite a few hours, but basically up to a sort of at this spot forward sort of thing. I go through the fence and now I'm officially on the trail kind of thing. But it would have been cool. There was, I'll talk about it, I'm sure. I will talk about pumas coming up because it was definitely a concern in this area. The next thing I want to say is about footwear. So I love my A-Solos boots. I love my A-Solos. Now, I've been over on both my ankles in my life, in my history. So like, boom, bend right over, snap, pop the tendon kind of thing. So both my ankles can tend to be dangerously, they're not weak, but their tendons have been elongated because of the injuries. So they can go over easier. So I'm pretty much relegated to wearing my A-Solo leather hiking boots because of the support, and I love it. All of my hiking is in those boots, except for, and I made the mistake here, when you're on flat terrain and you're going a long distance on just flat, clean, easy terrain, then those leather boots are a problem because you will get horrifying blisters, as we will find out. That is when it would be better to have a second pair of shoes, nice light hiking shoes that I can put on for the long flat terrain where I know I'm not going to twist my ankle. But as soon as I get into rocks and things like that, you put on the bigger boots.
You have to pay attention to what you're doing, or you can, as has happened here, you can perish.
This is a very popular hiking trail, so what could go wrong? Yet still I can't help myself from thinking in terms of survival. It's not all that geeky, it's just good trekking sense.
Look at this. called Taurus. And these little babies here are edible. It's probably last year's crop, so they don't look so good. But the point here is not so much survival. It's as you hike even on a known trail, it's just keeping your eyes open. I've seen clover, dandelion, yarrow. Good to get that kind of information and be taught what's available in case you do run into trouble.
This is an oddball survival experiment for me. I'm far from being alone. I'm passing other hikers along this very accessible trail. So how can anyone die on a busy trail?
Well, the trail today, not really long by most standards, not bad. 4 to 5 hours. Some up, some down, mostly flat. The problem is that every year on even the simplest of trails in some of the most beautiful parks around the world, hundreds of people get lost. People shouldn't die, but they are in places just like this.
On December 24th, Loreno walked from the Chileno Refuge, which is further back from where I started, all the way to the Coiron camping area, located on the northeastern corner of the O Circuit, a journey of 8 hours. Mirroring his movements is allowing me to understand a little of how he would be feeling.
Okay, so now I'm going to tell you the story of trying to get set up to do this. So what I wanted to tell this story of Loreno, and just how it could happen, and I was going to, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to highlight the beauty of the park and that, but I knew that this could be problematic. I mean, the park superintendents sort of thing they wouldn't want me even mentioning him. But I believe that to be an incredible disservice, not to make people aware of the dangers that a certain area is dangerous enough that people may have perished. You need to know this. And I was never going to do it in a way that was going to be disrespectful. So I was set up that way, but I got in this situation where I had connected with a young guy down there who was a park guide. And and he was, of course, now that it's in this era, it's hard for me to contact people without them knowing who Survivorman is. So he knew who Survivorman was, and so, but unfortunately, when it's people in positions of power, they assume that you're coming down and you might have like a massive ego and you're a TV star and a celebrity and all of this sort of stuff. And of course, they don't, until they meet me, they don't know that that's all a pile of crap, that I'm just a dude trying to do what he does, which of course, I was still always about the education. That's what I was about. But however, here's the interesting part. What was starting to happen was those other shows that came along and all of their reality bullshit, they were paving, they were not paving the way, they were paving a terrible way ahead, because people will go, oh, I know what you guys do with those survival shows. And I'd be like, no, not my show. And I'd have to really, really double explain myself. If someone had only ever watched Man vs. Wild or, Naked and Afraid, and then say, I want to come and I'm going to film this survival expedition, they'd go, well, we know what you guys do and no way we're going to. So it was always a big explanation on my part. And that was happening here in Patagonia. These guys were afraid. There was the language barrier. They weren't sure, was I going to try something foolish? So I had this young guy that I hooked up with who was a guide in this park. And so he'd been guiding for a long time. And I don't know, he might have been around 22, I think, maybe 25, 26, somewhere in the early to mid-20s. So he was full of piss and vinegar, right? Now, at first, he was all excited. It was Survivorman, and he was all super supportive and everything. I was saying, look at, when we meet with the park superintendents, I don't want to get into the whole thing that I'm there to, talk about that story. I just want to film my story of going through the park, and I'll relate to that just in a little bit. Well, when we were having that discussion, I saw him make a change where he had decided, and this happens a lot, people become, they claim an ownership in an area where they're a guide. Now, I was a guide in Temagami, Ontario, and ran the Temagami Wilderness Center, and I probably felt very much a sense of ownership too, but not, this was over the top. This guy switched, and I could tell that while he was supposed to be my liaison, and he swore he was going to help me make things happen and get me into the park and everything, I saw when we went into a meeting with like 3 executives or 2 executives in an office, and he's there, and I saw him switch and decide to sort of be on their side of the table, grilling me, and after I'd gotten the approval to come and do this before I flew down there. Okay, so now bear in mind, I've now spent close to $100,000 or more to get the crew, to get everything rolling, to get all set up and get down there. And this kid decides that, you know, he wanted to flex his muscle, and that he might choose, he indicated to me that he had all the power and that he could sway them one way or the other. And that I needed to tell the story that he thought I should tell. So it was interesting. I had to do a quick about face myself and start pulling out a little psychological manipulation of this guy, because I recognized, when you deal with someone with a very large ego, you play to that ego, you hold them in the palm of your hands. So often this has happened to me. It's like, oh, I get it. This guy wants this to be all about him. Okay, and it's not about him at all, but he wants it to. So I've learned over the years, yes, it's manipulation, but that's exactly what I've had to do. It's like, okay, throw a few compliments, praise them for, you know, their position and their authority and how skilled they are, and they melt like butter. You get them on your side. I had to do it with this guy. And one other story, we're sitting there at one point and having a cappuccino or something, and this is how this guy was. He was the kind of guy that, you know, argued incessantly, probably at a high school party about nothing. And I don't remember what I'd said or what we were talking about. It might have been politics. It might have been an environmental thing. I don't remember. But his rebuttal started off with, "You can't tell me that blah, blah, blah." And he laid that into me, but then he like paused waiting for my reaction. And I just went, in that situation, it was so egregious, I just went, okay. And then he was like, well, why? And he knew I disagreed, so he was like, well, what? What do you like? You know, what are you gonna say to that? And I went, well, you just. And he actually said something like that, and I said, well, you just told me that I can't tell you, so I'm not gonna waste my time. And he was like, oh, blah, blah, and he gets all, man, these guys, these young, full of piss and vinegar 20-somethings who think they own the world, and they just have not been humbled enough yet and have not learned yet to relax, you know. And so where this guy made the mistake was he positioned himself after being my guy, my liaison, the guy who said, I can get you in there, you are going to be able to, and by the way, you're going to be able to tell the whole story of the hiker and everything. This was all laid out before I ever got on an airplane. He switched when I got down there to play a tough guy. And I thought, okay. Literally, it's like, that's how it's going to be. All right. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to agree to everything. I'm going to say yes to everything, which I did. I don't care if I even had to put it in writing, which I didn't. I just agreed and nodded and yes, yep, absolutely. No, I won't even mention the hiker. No, this is going to be about celebrating the trail. That's it. Yep. If you ever watch it's a great documentary, Beyond the Lighted Stage, which is the story of Rush. And it's like when the label freaked out after Caress of Steel, and they wanted Rush to write rock and roll singles, and the manager went down, and it was the same thing. Yes, yep, there will be more singles. Yep, we will do. Yep. It's the very same thing here. I'm just down there nodding approval to everything they told me, and then I thought, fuck you guys. I should have probably warned you about potty mouth on this one, but in any event, here, I'll do a warning right now. Quick warning, interjection here. Luke's pulling this from later on, but there's going to be some potty mouth. Okay, Luke, put that up front. Okay, there. Now that warning you've already seen, and here it is again. I thought, fuck those guys. No way. I'm just going to do this, and I got out there, and of course, as you can tell, in narration and everything else, and that's where how I thought I would do it. I could do it all in narration. And of course, my resolve got stronger once I got home. I was like, totally fuck those guys. I'm telling the story. That's what this was all about. That's what they agreed to before I got on a plane. And they did the about face that when I got down there, not me. Long story, I know, but wanted to tell it.
You know, this part of the trail, what I've done is you're supposed to do it in 2 sections. The first day, the second day. That's what I'm doing. But some hikers, usually men, they want to do the macho thing, they push really hard. And that is the case with one tragic hiker on this very trail. First day, did both legs of the journey. That everyone does in 2 days, he did in 1. And the thing is, when it comes to...
I remember now. They told me I wasn't allowed to say his name. So I think you can tell that I abided by that while doing this filming. And then it was later when I got home, I thought, screw that, I'm telling the story.
To emergencies or falling into very dangerous situations, what I do is I like to count up the lemons. I add the lemons up. 1 lemon, 2 lemon, 3 lemon. You know, you're injured, that's a lemon.
Okay, so this is important. This 3 lemon technique is something I learned when I was being a guide. In fact, I believe it was Mark Scriver from Black Feather Wilderness Adventures that first taught me this, and I've been teaching it ever since. The 3 lemon method of recognizing the kind of trouble you're getting into when you're out on any kind of trekking, any kind of adventure. So have a listen here.
Lemon. Weather's bad, that's a lemon. Your canoe's got a hole in it, that's the 3rd lemon. You need to stop and fix the circumstances. So as I work to try and maybe CSI this particular tragedy on this trail, the first lemon for me right off the bat, right in the very beginning, is pushing really hard and doing in 1 day what you're supposed to do in 2 days. People who set up these trails in these parks, they don't do it ignorantly. They know how far the human body can go and how much somebody should be pushed. The recommendations matter. When you ignore them at your own peril. So even now, got a good blister on the back of my heel. On my right foot and on my left foot, I'm still nursing a pulled Achilles heel from about 9 months ago. And it's reminding me of that fact with every step. These injuries constitute for me, let's call it a half a lemon right now. The point being is I got to pay attention.
It's a good little technique when you're out there. I mean, as you see, you can even get nuanced with it and call it a half a lemon. And now I know why I'm limping. The pulled Achilles heel formerly, and then the blister that's developing because I'm wearing those boots, which you can see in this shot, those boots on a long flat, I think it was 7 miles of terrain and just the wrong footwear.
You know, now that I think of it, because I'm out here alone, that's got to constitute a half a lemon right there. So, if not a full lemon. So, for now, let's just say I've got 1 lemon stacked up against me. And I want to pay attention to that.
So what happens when you get to the next? So 1 lemon is just knowledge. You just got to recognize it, acknowledge it. 2 lemons is, uh-oh, something's going, I got to think about this now. So let's say it comes on to pouring rain. That's a 2nd lemon. And you can still keep trekking when you have 2 lemons, but you have to be much more cautious. The 3rd lemon is the stop. So injuries, pouring rain, and you dump your canoe, a predator in your way or something like that. Whatever that 3rd lemon is, that's when you stop. You stop and reconsider what you're doing and really take everything into account, do the next thing, which is the Survivorman zones of assessment, and decide how you're going to move forward or not.
About being overcautious. The lemon method is serious business. Tragedies occur every year simply because of casual attitudes taken toward wilderness adventure. Trekking out onto the land is all well and fun until something goes wrong.
The thing about having an accident halfway on the trail here, I was pretty sure that people will come along, but then what do? Do they turn around and go all the way back up? Very steep hills here.
I want to say that a lot of times too, what I used to say, and I think I remember it here too, they said, do you have any drones? And I said, no, I have an aerial camera. And an aerial camera sounds much nicer, doesn't it? All of these DJI drones that are out there now, they're not drones, they're aerial cameras. And it's a shame that they've been lumped in with drones because we're out there getting, beautiful B-roll of the trees up at the top, and people who don't understand this are like, oh, you got a drone? Oh, and good Lord, the unnecessary fear factor for us using aerial cameras, and certainly it's worse in other countries. It's just ridiculous. You know, thank goodness that DJI has, like, I just use the really tiny ones, the 249 gram ones, because it's not subject to the same rules anything 250 grams and over are. So there's something to know about that. You have the larger drones, you have to have all of your licensing and rules and everything in place. When you get the smaller ones, well, the cameras on the smaller ones are beautiful right now. By the way, what is that 249 grams based on? It's based on something that an airplane could hit and not be damaged. So basically it's based on the weight of a bird. So that's what the 249 grams is about. And so that little guy you shoot up in the air to get your air, I mean, pretty much all certainly of season 3 Wild Harvest episodes are shot with a tiny little drone, and it gets beautiful, gorgeous shots. And you defeat the purpose of having to get all the licensing and follow by all these other rules. So just something to know. What I was getting at, though, was that I'm pretty sure Ian was here shooting. We wouldn't have been allowed to shoot in the park, but there's ways around it. You can go to the backside of a park, you can shoot your drone up, you can film the park, you get that beautiful image of the park, but you're actually outside the park boundary. And it's legal, and everything's fine. That's one way around trying to get that footage of something beautiful that you can't legally go in and do. And I do not recommend going in and breaking the rules by any stretch.
Or do they continue on going down to get to help? Either way, you're going to be many, many hours waiting, potentially on your own, for help to arrive. The hiker that perished just before John Gardner Pass didn't even have a tent with him. I'm all for sleeping under the stars, for sure.
I remember now. Sorry, I'm a little backpedaling here, but remember why I was not saying his name. It's because I believe they said something about they wanted to see my footage before I left the country. Like, they were really being stern about it. So I was allowed, I was allowed to reference a hiker, but I was not able to say him by name. And yeah, obviously with narration, once I got back home, I said, screw you guys. But that's what I'm doing here. Huh.
But you gotta still carry some form of shelter. Small, lightweight tent would be easy to carry these days. They're incredible how light they can make them and how protective they can be. Still sleep under the stars. Just consider it an emergency shelter. And it's there when you need it.
I'm following Loreno's trail, a moderate 6-hour hike to the Dixon Refuge.
As a general rule, depending on your level of experience, what shouldn't happen.
By the way, if you're thinking, well, geez, Les, you were a bit of a goof, you know, you didn't do what they asked, you have to understand, these guys are complete and total dicks. I mean, even their tone and their approach and everything, they were just being full assholes to me because all of the permissions had been granted before I left Canada and got on the airplane. And when I was there is when they decided to switch. And it was like, the way they presented to me was they knew they had me, and they knew they wanted to make me acquiesce to whatever they wanted to say, and everything they had to say was opposite to what they had agreed to before I left Canada. So, and using this liaison and all the rest, this one dude, the young guy. So it was a very frustrating experience that way. So why did I decide to go this route? Well, that's why. Had they been more just like, no, we're really concerned, you know, we could have had really good, mature conversations about it. Not a single one of those conversations were mature. They were asinine.
Is that you attempt
So fuck them.
these types of treks, these trails, these journeys alone. Now, I will admit, if you've got lots of years of experience, then yeah, I'm okay with it, you know, I'm all right with, I certainly spend my time alone out here. But if you don't, going on a solo trip can be a grave mistake. You can't watch a survival program on TV and head out and imitate it. It's not safe. It's taken me years to know what I know, to have learned what I've learned. And I practiced hundreds and hundreds of times with other people before I ever attempted anything alone. Because I don't want to end up looking like that.
Loreno Santos spent the second last day of his life walking the same trail that I'm on now. A moderate 6-hour trail, at the end of which he would check in and spend the night.
Whether it's extreme outdoor adventure or a survival scenario, you still have to come on the better odds of the 5 components of survival. The kit you carry, the skill you have, your physical abilities, luck, and your will to live. Without all 5 in some kind of measure, then you may just very well perish. Well, I think that's it. I think I'm downhill now. The thing about going downhill is this. It seems like, okay, well, I'll be downhill, that's no problem. On the downhills, where most of the accidents occur, and people don't slip and twist their ankles going uphill, that's rare, because you're going slow and methodical. You go downhill, that's actually when things get dangerous. You have to recognize, on the downslope is when you've got to be more vigilant, or extra vigilant, let's say. One wrong little tiny twist, one little snap of your ankle, and you're into survival mode.
The bigger accidents, like falling off a cliff, dumping your boat in rapids, getting attacked by a wild animal, these all do happen. But it's the smaller details that are more often than not what lead to a survival situation. Or perhaps it's simply more that if you don't take care of the small details along the way, when and if something horrific does happen, it'll be that much harder to handle.
I'll tell you a little story about drinking from streams as you go along. There was a time when I was adventure racing. Everyone was sort of told to worry about Giardia, but you know, I knew that area well, and with my team, we would go through, and every time we came to a swamp, I would say, this is good. It's moving, fine, drink it. Giardia, it's gonna take 6, 7, 8, 9 days to hit you anyway, but then you're home, take a pill, it's gone. But all of the other teams refused. They were not drinking. When we got to the first station, all of the other teams, as they had come in, looked pale. They were having the dry heaves. They looked sick. My whole team looked refreshed and ready to go on to the next day. And not one of us got Giardia. So in a situation when it comes down to dehydration or Giardia, I'll take the Giardia any day.
And what was going on there was the teams wanted to keep their speed up and win the race, and so they didn't want to take the 10 minutes to use their filters and filter water to rehydrate. So they just kept going because they were afraid of Giardia. It was really a misleading and it was wrong advice to give, especially when people are racing through the woods and need to hydrate constantly. This fear of Giardia, I just ran into it last weekend hiking with a group, and I kept drinking, and I got a couple of guys to drink. We were in upstate New York. We were in the Adirondacks, the Catskills. The water was coming right out of the ground. It was fresh and clean and beautiful. And so, you know where the most cases of Giardia are? In Toronto, for example. This statistic is old, but 500 cases per year in daycare centers. Little kids touching themselves, touching each other, spreading around those germs. Daycare centers have the highest percentage of Giardia infections, whatever you want to call it, than the wilderness ever will. So again, you die quicker from dehydration than you ever will from Giardia.
The puma here are the largest on the planet. They can reach 6 feet from nose to butt, not including the tail. That's a big cat. And this is all his home. Now, before I start putting the fear of mountain lions in everybody, let's be clear, it's a ridiculously rare situation. And generally speaking, they tend to only go after someone or something that's 90 pounds or less. With mountain lions, intimidation is the way. Make yourself seem bigger, make yourself seem noisy, If there's 2 or 3 of you, band together, go shoulder to shoulder. That's little spots like this. When you are in heavy predator country, especially cat country, this is perfect pouncing location, right? This is the stuff you want to watch out for. They want to jump down on you, get you in the neck sort of thing. That's why they don't like people walking alone out here, and that's why they forbid you to walk out here at night. That's a big cat. And I'm walking right through his living room.
I'm hiking the
I gotta say, some of this music is just fantastic. This is we'd sort of changed tones along the way, and I think this is probably a lot of Ian Auger, Richard Jackson music, and also George Catapan, which I just thought was just terrific.
The percussion guys really, you know, that's an edgy music instrument to begin with, because, you know, the pounding, driving, which really worked well for, you know, Journey. And for Survivorman, because it could go dark, and it could really convey that, you know, whether it's you know, you're conveying weather, obviously drums and thunder and rain, you can't go wrong there. But then, you know, you got the combination, like Ian and Richard were really great because they could bring in some really different sort of ethereal kind of themes that where they could get into your head as well as you know, get power out. And that getting in the head thing became, it happened in a bunch of times because it's part of the process that you went through.
Hey everyone, allow me to interrupt myself. I don't really like hawking merchandise and swag, but you guys do ask all the time where you can get certain items. For example, check this out, Hennessy hammock. I put a lot of time and effort into designing this hammock with Hennessy. It's their top hammock. It's an amazing, beautiful, comfortable hammock to enjoy for all of your adventures out there, so just check it out. It's got a full-size tarp, which was a big thing for me. It's got insulation, and I love it. So I've got the Hennessy hammocks. Of course, for years I've been in a phenomenal relationship with Hella of Norway, Hella Knives. And this is our signature knife, of course, the Tamagami. These knives are handmade. In fact, I've been there to this very ancient factory where I don't know how many, it's well over 100 years that they've been operating, and every single handle is handmade. All of the grinding, everything is done by hand. And these knives are absolutely beautiful. I also now have a brand new relationship, and you will see these items, new forging tools that I'm designing with LT Wright Knives out of Ohio. And also, Chef Paul Rogalski of Wild Harvest has the signature Chef Paul Rogalski kitchen knife collection. Those are a big thrill to me, to have these beautiful items that we spent years designing, and I still have them available for you. However, if you want to go more the route of just enjoying the Survivorman legacy, if you will, then of course, go to my website, lestroud.ca, go to the shop page. Right there, you've got everything. All the swag, all the merch, such as my manual on survival. This is, if you want to get into survival, this book is meant to be a way to walk you through step by step, because I deal a lot more with concepts than I do with specifics, because that's really important. Once you understand the concepts of fire by friction, for example, you can do it depending on where you are, because I can't give you the advice on how to do it here in Canada and hope that it's also going to work down in the jungle. Things are different. So I've always been very proud of this book, Survive. So that is my survival manual. Also, if you weren't aware, I've got the book Will to Live. I wrote this book well, it's kind of for a lot of fun. I took my 10 favorite survival stories, such as Chris McCandless Into the Wild or the Robertson family and the life raft, and I basically dissect them with this book. I tear apart the story, I go through everything, and I even give them a little bit of a grade on how I thought they did. So I really enjoyed writing this book. It's a real easy read, it's a fast read, but I think there's a lot of insight there for you into all of these different examples of people who have either survived or perished. Speaking of books, so honored, so thrilled, so proud that Wild Outside, my first children's book, has won the Yellow Cedar Award, Best Nonfiction Children's Book in Canada for ages 7 to 14. I tell stories from Survivorman, lessons learned during those expeditions and adventures, and there are even activities they can do in the out of doors. So there you go. My new book, my children's book, Wild Outside, Around the World with Survivorman, has just won the Yellow Seed Award, and I'm up for another award yet. And in keeping with stuff that's going on right now, we are also up for an award for our Season 1 recipe book from the series Wild Harvest. And if you've never caught the series Wild Harvest, check this out. Woohoo! Beautiful little rainbow. Dinner.
This perhaps is the most incredible kitchen scenario I've ever had.
When you start getting involved in local foraging and bringing the ingredients home and playing with them in the kitchen, can you create a dish where the domestic ingredients don't overshadow the wild ingredients?
Hey there! Oh! Go on! Now the job's getting fun.
This dish is a showcase of how great these foraged ingredients come together.
It's the best when it's its own flavor. When you're making something with a wild edible, you're nailing it and not losing the wild flavor.
Sometimes it is about the ingredients.
Tell me that doesn't look awesome. 2 seasons right now, 26 episodes. In the United States, it's on PBS stations. You can also get it on this YouTube channel. In Canada, Cottage Life TV. In Sweden and Norway, on Matt Cannellan. It's on National Geographic. Asia, which includes China and India. So my Wild Harvest series is playing around the world now, and we, with every single season, create a recipe book based on the recipes that we show you in the actual shows themselves. So that's Wild Harvest. And of course, if you want the DVD, you can get that on this website as well, lesstroud.ca. And let's not forget too, that I'm a musician. The CDs themselves are available on the website. The next release will be the re-release of the Mother Earth album on vinyl. But go on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to music, or on my website. You can go to the shop page, you can pick up all of my CDs. So this is the last one. This is my 20th anniversary selection. Check it out. Every film I've ever made, 76 films in all of the Survivorman, Bigfoot, Beyond Survival, music documentaries, one-off films such as the award-winning Lalache about the school shooting up in Canada and a healing canoe trip. This is my 20th anniversary, 76 films. And people that have picked this up have raved about it. And I'm really proud that I can say I've got 20 years of anything, to be honest with you. That's available for you as well on that Les Stroud shop page. Okay, that's me hawking my stuff. Back to the video.
The beautiful Torre del Paine Trail in Patagonia, Chile. I'm trying to understand how anyone could die on a popular and not overly difficult trail.
This wind can gust at times to literally lift my feet up a bit, move me sideways. Wind has always been my nemesis. Give me rain, heat, cold. Wind is the toughest thing. It cuts through everything. Takes all of the heat that you have, your internal combustion, and just whisks it away. I can be hypothermic in seconds, really. And this is the kind of thing that starts to throw, as I like to say, a lemon into the equation. So now I got damaged heels, I'm hiking alone, and I'm facing a very strong wind, doing difficult hills. I'm already at a lemon and a half, 2 lemons. It means I need to take care of every next step that I take.
I'm following in the footsteps of Loreno Santos, who tragically lost his life, an experienced hiker on a moderate trail. It doesn't make sense.
Brief little moment out of the Patagonian wind here. I'll take advantage of it. I'm probably exaggerating a bit when I say, hypothermia kick in within seconds. It can't really. If you follow the 1-10-1 rule, take the first minute to calm yourself down. Now that's primarily when you're dealing with sort of immersion, like falling through the ice. Take a minute, calm yourself down, and then 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes before you start to deal with the immobility of your arms and your body seizing up, and then 1 hour before hypothermia actually starts to set in. So the 1-10-1 rule can get you out of a lot of situations, or at least it'll calm your mind down. So.
I learned that from Professor Popsicle out of, I believe it was Winnipeg. I did jump through the ice with him in doing a Surviving Alaska, I think it was, for Discovery Channel. It was one of the few times when I wasn't in charge and someone else's production. That 1-10-1 rule is his, And I think he's proven it out scientifically. So something to remember. You don't have to panic when it comes to hypothermia. You've got some time.
I don't risk hypothermia yet, but the thing is, if you keep pushing and sweating and pushing and sweating and you're in the cold wind, you slowly onset it. That's actually the worst type of hypothermia of all, is that slow onset, because it starts to mess with your mind. And hypothermia, when it messes with your mind, is a very dangerous, dangerous foe, because you will start to think, when you're really deep into it, that you're actually warm when you're not. And so you can see the signs of someone with hypothermia by walking along behind them and a glove is dropped and another glove and a hat's dropped, and they start shedding off clothing because it's like, oh, I'm so hot. But they're not. They're actually slowly shivering to death.
No one wants to believe it can happen to them. It's embarrassing. You're letting your travel mates down. This should be easy. And so we bury our issues. We ignore the signs, push on, sometimes into our own oblivion.
That's a funny thing. I've already started to do the kind of actions that you're sort of not supposed to do. What I've done is I started getting rid of stuff that I thought was too heavy. The last campground, I dropped off some excess food, an excess shirt, sweater, a hat, just stuff that I thought, you know, I don't think I'm gonna need this stuff. Of course, I'm making that decision while I'm walking in the sunshine, and that's also dangerous. I've probably got 15 pounds more than anybody else that comes out here. Because the reality is I've got camera gear and camera batteries. And even though I've slimmed down quite a bit, it still weighs, it's still heavy. So I suppose carrying all this extra heavy gear should almost count as a lemon or a half a lemon as well. But just the same, it's fatigue and being cold that often causes you to make decisions that are the wrong decisions to make.
Loreno kept his supplies to a bare minimum. A small rain poncho, no tent, little food. These were his decisions to make. But it must be remembered that one of the key components of survival is your kit, what supplies you have with you. You can live or die based on these supplies.
So I just came up to one of those classic moments. My feet are killing me. I got a blister on one heel, Achilles tendon on the other heel is an issue. And I was sure where I have to get to, the campground was just around the next corner. And I came to a sign. It said 3 more kilometers. That's demoralizing when you think you're almost there. All right. Oh, that's a sight for sore eyes. The camp is where I'm headed.
Pacing your travel is a survival skill. It takes experience to know without constantly checking a map exactly where you are on a trail. Yet your perspective can change every trip, since the weight you carry, your current physical condition, the topography of the trail, and even the weather can all play into just how fast you're moving.
There you have it. That's where I came from so far. It's just way, way down at the bottom. This should be, dare I say it, a relatively easy hike today, which is good because tomorrow's the ball breaker.
Here in Patagonia, I'm retracing the steps of a hiker that met with a tragic fate.
Well, I did do my best this morning to try and tape up my toes, and someone loaned me their Vaseline to coat my heels with. You can't let pride get in the way of looking after your body when you're on a long journey. All right, let's do a morning recap here. I'm on the Torres del Paine Trail. I'm going around to do the John Gardner Pass, and by all accounts, like any other park, like any other trail around the world, and although there are some, we call them treacherous sections, no one should ever really run into trouble on these trails. So I want to break down how someone could come on a trail that should be just fine and die.
When someone offers you some moleskin, band-aids, or even food, don't turn all macho and refuse the help. When they give you advice, consider it. it may save your life.
This is exactly the kind of forest that was destroyed here just a few years ago. Up to 20,000 hectares were destroyed. Lightning? Nope. Natural occurrence? Nope. Hikers. The rule here is that you can't use anything other than propane gas. But there was a group of military men who thought they were above the rule. So they tried to push it a little bit hard and ended up in between campsites when it got dark. I suppose they didn't care. Probably thought it was a very cool thing to do, and then they started to get themselves set up, and the way the story goes, they lit their fire of liquid gas, and the wind picked up, started to burn the grass. Before you knew it, 20,000 hectares were burned right through this park. Fire has always been key to survival for me. It's an element of survival that I look to first. If you can gain the knowledge of how to make and, of course, control and maintain.
I just want to interrupt my own little talk about fire there and point out, you know, this was some of the brilliance of Barry Farrell's work as an editor. He loved playing, and still does, with color palettes. And so here we are discussing fire. It's a darker commentary to make and to give, and he's switched. If you notice, he switched the color palette to take all of the, well, most of the color just right out. And you get this atmosphere that fits the dialogue, which is a very creative way to edit.
Well, one thing I've always been a fan of is palette, and that's one thing that I wanted to make sure that Survivorman had, is every episode was a palette. And that palette was musical, and it was also color, and just the style of how you of how things would do. Like the darker something would be, it would be, you know, it would be like a film noir type of feel to it. So we would apply that type of sensibility to how it was edited and how the camera would move or not move.
A good fire, you can survive well and not cause this. I guess in many ways what I'm trying to do is at least slightly simulate the circumstances of a hiker that perished out on John Gardner Pass. It's impossible to completely do it. A, the park authorities won't let me. And B, I'm not a young 20-something bent on pushing through at all costs. So I have my disadvantages and the things that are holding me down a bit for pushing on through, because there's nothing like facing the white wind of John Gardner Pass.
I'm just going to interrupt here, a small tangent commentary. You know, as a professional outdoor guide for years, and even when I was in my 20s and that, the thing about me is it's all about connecting to nature. It's all about the land, the beauty, the power of a connection to the natural world. But as an outdoor guide, I would so often, you know, weekend warriors would come up. They'd either be young and in their 20s, and so it's all machismo. They all want to prove it. And so every canoe trip came about, would end up being, you know, we got to do 30 kilometers a day. We're here to do 30 kilometers a day. Like, oh, shit. And I would try to pass those trips off to the other guides, because even though I could handle it, I just didn't want to. It's like, then what are you here for? Is this just a matter of exercise? Is this trying to regain your manhood sort of thing? And a lot of times, yeah, that's exactly what it was and still is in a lot of cases. Weekend warriors is a nice way of describing a lot of, I think, men who are emasculated with their job in the city, and they come out and they got to get it all done in the weekend. And that's why they come out aggressive, and they got to cut everything and chop everything down and mow the lawn, and missing entirely this connection to the natural world. So for me, yeah, as I say, there's the young version of it, but then there's the older guys too, who they're the ones who are kind of trapped by their jobs. And for me, it's like, no, if you could just, you know, for example, a canoe trip for me that takes 6 days to do, I will plan it in an 8-day stretch. A 4-day canoe trip, I'm planning it in a 5-day stretch, and so on. The reason is, for safety, I have an extra day for any contingency plans. Anything that goes wrong, it's like, oh, it's pouring rain, we can't even get across the bay, can't get up over the pass. Okay, well, we got a day, an extra day. We'll take that day now. So for safety, it's fantastic. In the end, if you don't need that extra day and you can see you're not going to need it, then it becomes a play day. It's like, you know what, let's hang out at the waterfalls and swim all day. Yeah, you know, and that is the beauty of whenever you plan, I'm giving advice now, whenever you plan a trek, you know, if it's a week, anything under a week, add a day. Just add a contingency day. And if it starts getting more than that, add 2 contingency days. You will find that is a fantastic way. And I don't have time, I work, I get it, I understand that. But whatever, you know, I'm just saying that the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to always add a contingency day. You will never regret it, and it's always wonderful. That's the way I trip. So rather than doing that 30-kilometer a day push, you know, my trips are going to be maybe 20 kilometers a day in a canoe, you know. Hiking, sure, I could hit 15 miles, but why? You know, 10 miles a day, beautiful, beautiful pace, and a chance to enjoy everything in the Marble Mountains in California or wherever I'm hiking. So just my opinion, but that is, if you're learning and you're getting into hiking and trekking, heed what I just had to say.
Maybe I should probably nickname it White Death.
Because of where his body was found, it's believed that Loreno set off from Dixon Refuge towards Los Perros Refuge early in the morning and was going to attempt to make the John Gardner Pass that same evening.
What I have to do now, basically, is keep walking off my blisters until they become calluses. If you've ever had to do that, you know what I'm talking about. Walk through the pain. And I still gotta go up over that mountain. Crap.
The John Gardner Pass is the most difficult part of the entire O circuit, where hikers reach the maximum elevation of 1,200 meters above sea level. It's a steep, rocky moraine considered by many hikers as the most physically demanding part of the trail.
It's one thing to be going uphill. It's quite another to be going uphill right against the wind.
By the way, do I recommend doing this hike? I can't remember the name of the park. I've said it several times in the show, but where the John Gardner Pass is, 1,000%. Stunningly beautiful. A phenomenal hike. And the campsites are wonderful. So if you ever get the chance, go down to Patagonia, do this hike. It's beautiful.
Whew. While carrying a camera.
All I did was simply pick the wrong hiking boots to wear for this trip. And now I'm paying the price.
Oh man, this downhill on the toes is deadly. Blisters on the toes, and then all the weight of your body shoves down into the toe of your boot. And squishes the toes even harder. Whoa!
The next section of the trek is the most difficult. It's where Loreno Santos tragically lost his life. Thousands of people cross it every year. It should never have been a place of death. The luck of this great weather is with me on my trek, so maybe I can at least take the time to cool down the blisters in the glacial stream.
Oh! Wow. Yeah, that's direct off the glacier.
The official full cert for Loreno Santos began on January 14th and continued for 3 weeks around the park until it was called off. They were unable to find a single trace of him.
The hiker that perished just up there, he was young and he had to be fit to keep the pace he was keeping. He pushed through the first campsite to the second campsite, which is, you know, nice for a very long day. I'm going to assume that he did stop here. I think the record showed that he stopped here because he was told not to carry on, and he carried on anyway in spite of warnings in terms of the weather. It's very misleading though. You're in the forest here, and so, you know, even if it was snowing, it would seem kind of pleasant here. And as it is, I saw a couple today, a very young, fit, fast couple went from the other campsite, and they're going to go all the way through, passing this spot. And each year, I get to collect more statistics, unfortunately.
I guess if I want to further my commentary about, you know, having this contingency day and stopping and smelling the roses is exactly that. If you don't stop and smell the roses, you miss the nature. You miss it. You say, oh, yeah, I did that trail. It was beautiful. But you still miss connecting to it. And you're on a canoe trip down through Temagami. You can miss the beauty and the power of the natural world when you're hell-bent for leather on your trek, on your trail. As I said, even in my young 20s, I knew this and was never hell-bent for leather. Always took the time to connect to that natural world that I was traveling through. It's a spiritual experience.
Ow.
On November 8th, 2014, almost a year after his disappearance, a guide from Torre del Paine National Park wandered off the trail between Los Perros camping site and Paso camping site, just before the top of the John Gardner Pass. Only 600 feet off the main trail, he discovered a badly decomposed body lying next to a pile of rocks. There was a pack still strapped onto the body, and inside the bag was an ID card belonging to the Argentine tourist, Loreno Santos.
All right, let's do a little update on the feet. I've got my boots sliced open on either side of the big and small toes. Although the laces are on, they're not done up at all, so the shoes are virtually undone. And it's somewhat better. The way I look at it, what's worth more to me? These hiking boots or my feet? They're just hiking shoes. I can get a new pair. I can't get a new pair of feet. So this trail I'm on right now is the last trail. That campsite I was at was the last bit of civilization that the hiker that perished here would have ever seen, unfortunately. There's a couple of theories on what happened to him, and I want to kind of try to break them down and take a look at the reasons why someone who seemingly had a lot of strength, at least, might have perished in a place like this with other hikers around, campsites at either end of trails, lots of water, and except for the pass that I'm headed to, a lot of shelter, a lot more tree shelter than I was expecting. So why perish in a place like this?
The initial autopsy revealed no signs of fractures or other life-threatening wounds. Pumas are very common here, but there were no signs of puma attack either. What is known was the weather that day, a complete whiteout, the White Death.
Now what I want to do is, let's piece together the day as it starts. He would have started off his morning, much like I did, the campground, have some breakfast, I'm sure, get himself suited up, a little bit of camaraderie, and then head out. Now, he was told he shouldn't attempt to pass because they're expecting the bad weather. I don't know how long it was before the bad weather kicked in. Did it hit him right here, where I am right now? Or Did it happen when he was going up the pass? Was it already started in the morning? I don't really know. When these tragedies happen, sometimes it's hard to put all the details together. For example, originally I was told that he was found within the tree line. But now I've spoken to someone who was here and was part of the search, who knows exactly where the body was, and it was well past the tree line. That changes things. That changes things a lot. There was one other.
I should just add to that. And that's what was happening was once I got away from the superintendent or whoever it was I was in the office with, and then the kind of, well, the punk that I was dealing with, out here, the authorities that were looking after the park and so on were far nicer. They were absolutely ready and willing to talk about the story, and they understood that, look, the point of this story was to help it, was to honor this guy's death in a way so that other people wouldn't perish in the same way. It was to get out the information about how not to let this happen. That was really part of the point here. This is why I kind of CSI the whole thing and try to figure out what went wrong. And in fact, if I remember correctly, I even talked to or notified his family so that it would be an honoring method as opposed to, as I said, the earlier guys who were treating it more like some sort of posturing of ego. But out here, the guides that were out here were quite willing to talk about it and were very nice and friendly, and they had the same concerns. They want people to know how things can go wrong so that they don't.
Very revealing aspect to the story that I've since learned. And it just changes everything as far as what might have happened to him. So there's basically a couple of different passes. If you look, that pass over there, that's not the one. It's over here. That's the pass that we have to go up and over. The hiker that was lost was going after this one, but he was actually found even further to the left, indicating that he just simply veered off trail. It's easy, even on bare rock, to go off trail and wander off where you shouldn't be going, and that's exactly what happened to the hiker that perished here. Now, on top of it, he had to deal with white wind, complete whiteout of snow, couldn't see 3 feet in front of him. Luck was not on his side that day. For me, luck's on my side. I've got blue sky. I want to get up to where the body was found and try to piece together the events that led to his demise.
It's thought that Loreno Santos died of hypothermia. Rangers think he wandered off the trail late in the afternoon, got lost, and it got dark before he was able to get back on track. Weather reports showed that the night of December 26 was a night of a terrible cold front. He knew of a trail that only the Sherpas took. He was young and strong with a respectable amount of mountain hiking experience. So there may have been a challenge in his mind to take this trail I'm on now, a trail that tourists are not allowed to go on. A personal challenge, perhaps, to prove everyone back at camp wrong and to push through the dreaded white wind. But he set himself up for failure. Muscles and machismo alone will never defeat a mountain.
This kind of trekking is you start off all limber and fast.
And so this was now a situation where the guides were actually assisting me to help me tell the story, giving me permission to go up off the trail, showing me where the body had, or pointing to anyway, where the body was found. So, as I said, they understood it, and so that's what I was able to do here now.
And you realize this is a serious hill. You slow down a bit, you carry on nice and slow. But at some point, you start facing the physical exhaustion, and that's when you start making big mistakes. I'm doing this climb in the sun. I can't imagine doing this in a whiteout. There is nothing that would keep me going up this in a whiteout. Not a chance.
I mean, look, the moral of that story is when you're faced with powerful weather, stop. It's not about you. Just stop. And it's crazy that many of us won't. We'll push on through. You've got to respect nature. You've got to respect the weather. Gosh, look at that. That is stunningly beautiful.
I have no way of knowing at this point if there was snow already or if the snow hit during the forested sections or if it didn't hit until right here. Because this section is where everything just opens wide up. A whiteout in a place like this, that'd be devastating. You wouldn't know where you were. And then at some point, he was also told back at the campground, you shouldn't go today, the weather's gonna be bad. But didn't listen. And that's the first issue, not recognizing the limitations to the day itself, the weather. Never mind your own strength, your own skill set. What's the topography and the weather saying to you? And when the experts are saying you shouldn't go out there now, it's bad news, then you shouldn't go out. Now, the other thing is the information that I'm getting. When I try to piece together the details of a tragedy or a survival situation, it's all about the details. And I was originally told that he was found within the tree line. It's not true. Now that I've spoken with some guides who were part of the search, I found out that he was found just up here, well out of the tree line, but well in the danger zone for the white wind. For me, I followed all of the steps. I have pretty much the same equipment that he had. I'm probably about 10 pounds heavier though because of my camera gear. I'm also 30 years older and I've got some bad blistered feet I'm still dealing with. And I'm pushing on.
I should point out that this is why it's always been, with a Survivorman episode, I stayed put most of the time. It's very difficult to film traveling when you're by yourself, when you're truly alone. The other shows that came along, that they could have grills jumping around all over the place because they had a big crew and they were just picking them up and taking them into different locations and shooting a scene. That's not at all what this is. And so for me, I tried to do some traveling episodes, but it was just excruciatingly difficult to film it, carrying all that gear and documenting where you're traveling through. And so I realized, well, it's kind of not worth it. I'm spending half the time trying to film myself travel and not enough time filming survival techniques and the teaching that I wanted to do, which is why for me the series ended up being predominantly stationary survival ordeals.
Boy, talk about your Stairmaster. Whew. I don't know. The more and more I do this climb, the more and more I think that the hiker that perished up here came up here deliberately. He wouldn't do even as far as I have and not automatically think, I must be going the wrong way. You have to think that. It's impossible to believe you're going the right way.
When I say deliberately, I mean against all the advice to wait a day. More like allowing ego and drive keep pushing us onwards. Going back would be embarrassing. Admitting defeat could be humiliating to an experienced person in any outdoor activity. Out here, our fate is guided by our own hands. Mountains got its own way. Disregard it at your own peril.
It said that he was found huddled underneath a rock. There's still some perplexing pieces to this. Number one is a massive search party came out and they could not find him. He was not found until a year later, actually. Now, a search party would have spotted something under this rock, I'm sure of it. I mean, I can see the trail from here. This is why you gotta have a check-in. You gotta let somebody know when you're gonna be back and where. If we walk through the steps from the campground, up on through the forests, seeing the whiteout, pushing forward, and either accidentally coming up this way, because what happens is this pass and that pass can look very similar, but that's the wrong one, and that's the right one. And the difference between the two can be life or death. So I think what I'll do is I'm gonna get up and over this pass now. My luck is still with me and the daylight's still with me. Well, there it is.
Now, I got to say that it turns out that I was incredibly lucky. They tell me that getting up and over this pass without any big wind, with a blue sky and warm temperatures, it's a handful of days per year. That's it. You only have a handful of days in which it's going to be like that when you get up and over this pass. So I was incredibly lucky to face that. Now, for filming, it would have been better if I'd been hit with the weather, because then I could say, and here's what it would have looked like, and you see the whiteout kind of thing. Or, the wind was up a bit, but if it had been really super strong wind, I could have shown that in some ways. So it was mixed blessings, right? It was a matter of way easier for me to do this with my filming and everything. But harder to tell the story of just how deadly it could be without the example of how deadly it could be. But this vision of coming up and over that particular pass is absolutely breathtaking. If you ever get a chance to do the hike, you will agree. It's absolutely breathtaking.
This is why people come out here. This is why chances are taken, because you can't match that with a video game or a TV show. In the end, I think what happened to this hiker was a simple combination of really bad luck and an accident. Given his skill set, which in terms of mountain climbing and trekking, he was decently experienced. What I don't understand is why, in the throes of huddling under a rock and realizing maybe that, that's it, he can't walk, why wouldn't he wrap himself up? He had a sleeping bag, sleeping pad, spare clothes, a stove, fuel, food. That's a question that will never be able to be answered. There's too many mysterious deaths happening out on wilderness trails.
Now, in hindsight, I would suggest that very, very likely hypothermia, because hypothermia, again, affects your mind. And you start taking clothes off, believing that you're too hot, when in fact, your core temperature is dropping down and you're dying slowly of hypothermia. That is likely the case scenario for this particular hiker who perished.
Most of them have simple answers. It's hard to get to them, though, when you're out here. Wilderness reclaims you pretty quickly. Takes away the clues and leaves you wondering how someone could perish on a well-marked, well-known trail.
Hypothermia is likely what ultimately took the hiker's life. Or was it machismo and overconfidence? Maybe one leads to the other.
It's knowing that places like this exist on this great earth of ours. is the reason why more and more people are heading out. Head out with knowledge, acquired skill set, make sure you're physically capable, hope for good luck, and keep a strong will to live. And you can survive anything.
Next year, someone will die in the wilderness. Maybe it'll be someone you know. Maybe it'll be you. It'll happen simply due to a careless attitude towards personal safety. There are 5 components to survival. The first 4 are not difficult to manage. How fit you are, what gear you carry, what skills you possess, and the luck of the day. Without them, all you have left is the 5th component, the will to live. But a mountain's got its own ways, and sometimes the will to live alone.
And where's that quote come from? Mountain's got its own ways. Of course, as you know it, Jeremiah Johnson.
Mountain's got its own ways.
So, remember that. Wilderness, mountains, the ocean, they've all got their own ways. You've got to respect them. You've got to respect weather. What's not shown here is from here now, I'm past the point of where he perished, so that's where the story really ends. I still had to walk out, and I had a long way to go. I had to go downhill. The next day, that day that I'm about to start going downhill, was excruciatingly painful. I had considered going barefoot if I could have. The pain that I had, I was now going downhill very steep, like climbing downhill. And then I landed in an encampment down there, and I took my boots off, and both feet were just a mass of blisters and blood. And I met up with some really nice people there, actually, who I stayed in touch with after the fact too, who, you know, I was out of moleskin and Band-Aids, and they had some, so I had people helping me out with stuff for my feet, but the rest of the trek out was nothing if not excruciatingly painful every step of the way. Anyway, so there you go, an oddball Survivorman, fraught with political issues, really, more than anything. You know, as I said, and I'll explain it again, you know, I went down there under false pretenses because I had all of my permissions in place. And then when I got there, they decided they wanted to change their mind. As I said, you've already spent a lot of money to get there. So I had to be a little subversive. I had to be a little subversive in the filming and to be able to bring this story home and share it, and hopefully share it for the purpose of people learning from it, which, as I said, and when I connected with the family, that's what they wanted. They wanted people to learn from this. And yeah, I won't comment any more on the idiots I had to deal with that were in this place of authority, except to say that this is a situation you get yourself into. If you want to go out and, you know, spend time living in the woods or doing this and that in the woods, you do have to get a lot of permissions. And you know, 9 times out of 10, you're not getting permission from someone who's got a strong sense of common sense, and you're dealing with some local who thinks the bush belongs to them, and it's just you have to play this strange game of compliance, and you don't want to break the law, you don't want to break any rules. But sometimes what they're trying to stop you from doing, they're doing it out of their own ignorance. And so you have to find ways around that. I've been doing that for years. All right. I think what's up next is Survivorman and Son. And the final one will be Logan and I in Mongolia. See you soon.